Okay, so I'm Amy, as you heard lots of people screaming. Just so you know who I am, I graduated NAU last year, so I'm no longer a student, even though I look like one, I know. And I got my degree in music education. This is really loud to me. Is it really loud to you guys? Okay, alright, it's fine. Then leave it. Okay, so I got my degree in music education, and then I was student teaching last fall at an elementary school and a middle school in town, and it was really fun. I also just got married. He's over there. He's right there. Yeah, so we're really cool people. So this is a picture of our wedding party all together, and we're having a Jedi and Sith battle because why not? That's real. This is real. This is real. So you can leave that up for a little bit if you want, Patrick. Okay, so I also am an InterVarsity intern, which is sort of a weird thing. So InterVarsity is the organization that's hosting this event tonight. Usually when I meet students on campus now, they say, once they figure out I'm not a student, they're like, what? Then what are you doing here? Why don't you leave? Don't you want to leave? And so I'm still here for a couple reasons. Well, it's my job. And I love college students, and I think, I don't love the current state of the world, and I believe that college students are the ones that are going to change the world because of the opportunities that we have and the resources that we have while we're in college. So it's my job to help make that happen. I help college students make intelligent and informed decisions about following Jesus, and in the hopes that we will model our lifestyles after him and change the world like he did. So that's my job. That's why I'm still here. Some other things that you should know about me. I am a frustrated critic, is how I would describe myself. It's really easy for me to focus on things that are wrong. I tend to constantly question like the status quo and stuff like that. I'm pretty intuitive, so I try to look at things from all different angles instead of just one perspective, which is why it's easy for me to see when something is wrong. And so I can tend to be kind of cynical. So I would describe myself as a natural skeptic. This all started because I grew up in the church, and I grew up as a PK, which means a pastor's kid. So I have attended every church program, Sunday school, summer camp, youth group, mission trip, worship conference, accountability buddy partnership thing, lock-ins, service projects, whatever, potlucks, you name a Christian-y weird thing, I've done it. And I was always asking my dad, who was the pastor, I was always asking him questions because I would get so frustrated when I would see things happen. And I think I probably drove him crazy sometimes. Because I was in the same church with the same pastor in the same building at the same location across the street from our house for my entire life, for 18 years, well, until I got to college. And so I had lots of reasons to ask why. Why do we do this? Why is this like this? How come my friends say different things? Why? So before we get to the first question of our series that we're here to talk about, I also just want to acknowledge the fact that there's probably a lot of diversity in the room tonight, in our backgrounds, in our expectations, maybe that you're even bringing into tonight, different beliefs, different perspectives, and that's awesome. And so thank you. I'm really excited about that. So whatever your circumstances are for being here, however you ended up here tonight, I just wanted to thank you for coming, because I realized that was bold and probably even awkward for some of you. So thank you for coming. So you've probably heard, but for the next 3 weeks, InterVarsity is going to be looking at some questions of a series called Hard Questions About God. So tonight, I'm going to be talking about the question, is it even rational to believe in God? And then next week, we're talking about how could a good God allow suffering, which I think is like the $1 million question that everyone has. And after that, is it even worth it to follow Jesus? So let's start with this first question. Is it even rational to believe in God? Is it even logical? And instead of me just saying, yes it is, goodbye, tonight is meant to be the start of an authentic and stimulating conversation on our campus, because how common is it that we even talk about things like this on a university? And I really want to try to engage our hearts and our minds tonight, both. So I'd really love for it to be that, to be the start of a conversation and not just a lecture, because you guys have enough of those without me. So after I'm done speaking, I have sort of an activity for us to do, and I just want to encourage you guys to talk. Even if you leave right away afterwards, that's fine. But I just want to encourage you to keep talking with whoever brought you, or the people around you, or your roommates, or whatever, about what you thought, too. And I want you to have a voice in this, and I really, really mean that, because otherwise I could have just written a snarky blog post and then shared it, and then I could just sit by and delete comments as people disagree with me. And that's just annoying, and no one likes that. So I want to start this dialogue so that we can all learn together. I'm of this crazy opinion that I can learn as much about myself and about God from someone who disagrees with me as someone who shares all of my opinions, and probably even more. So let's look at this question. This is a pretty daunting question. At surface level, it might seem kind of simple, but I really think it's anything but that. And if I were you, I'd be pretty suspicious of anyone who would tell you that it is, or that they could give you a definite answer in the 20 or 30 minutes that I have to speak to you tonight. Because it really is complicated. And so the other day, like a couple weeks ago, I texted my older brother, Michael. I also have a younger brother, he's right there. But I texted my older brother, Michael, he's not here, and I asked him this question. I just randomly texted him this question. He was like, what? He's one of the smartest people that I know, and I'm sure my younger brother would agree with me. He also identifies himself as an atheist. So I was really curious what he would think about this question. So he was like, okay, I want to talk about that, but let me think about it all day long so that I'm prepared to have this conversation with you. So he did, and we both kind of thought about it all day, and then we Skyped later that night, and he had written 2 full pages back to back of other questions that he had that came from just thinking about this one. So we talked for a long time, and it was really cool. But for the sake of time and all of our sanity, especially mine, for the next 20 minutes, let's try to just focus on this one question and try to suspend all of your other questions, because I'm sure you have a lot more, and I do too. So what I want to present to you tonight is that yes, it is rational to believe that God exists, but when I was talking with my brother Michael, we had a much easier time starting the conversation by just focusing on kind of the first half of the question. Is it rational to believe? Is it rational to believe in one thing over another? Is it rational to believe in anything at all? So my very first semester in college here at NAU, I used to stay up late talking to my roommate, Lisa, about Christianity and religion and philosophy and all kinds of things. It was really fun. When we moved in together, we were both Christian, and we knew that. I remember us trying to find a church together in Flagstaff and doing that sort of thing. She was taking this class, I think it was Religion 105, I could be wrong, but it was called Religions of the World. How many of you have taken that class? Have any of you taken that class? Okay, great. So she was taking this class our first semester, and so she would come back to our dorm and would talk about it with me. She'd always have just interesting thoughts and questions that came from taking that class, because in the class she heard a bunch of different religions plus atheism presented with exactly the same validity. And that makes sense, because that's what that class is for. So it makes sense that her professor sort of had this conclusion. I don't know if it'd be the same professor that any of you have taken. I don't know what his name was. But his sort of conclusion that he taught the class was that you could pick and choose any of these religions that they studied. Pick whichever one was right for you, but it doesn't really matter because they're all the same, ultimately. So we would talk about that a lot. And about a month into the semester, very first semester in college for both of us, she decided that she was going to convert and be baptized into the Mormon church. And her rationale came from what she heard in her class, which is that it doesn't really matter how different Mormonism is from evangelical Christianity because they're really the same. All truths are equally valid. Everything is the same. So what really surprised me is how quickly she was able to come to that decision from just being in college a few weeks. And along with the new doctrines and sort of practices that Lisa was adopting from the Mormon Church, or the Church of the Latter-day Saints, she was also sort of taking on this perspective that's pretty popular called relativism, which states that all truths are equally valid. But I think today it's also sort of come to suggest that if you don't think that every truth is right and valid, that you're intolerant, that you're bigoted, that you're closed-minded. And that seems to be sort of like the most popular perspective on college. From the conversations that I've had with people that I've met, that seems to be sort of the most popular thing. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's at least how it seems to me. So anyways, as you can imagine, from that point on, there was a little bit of tension in our room in Wilson Hall. I wish that I could say that we had these brilliant and profound conversations late at night, pillow talk conversations, about theology and philosophy and all these things like we used to, but after that it really just got kind of awkward. I did do a lot of reading because I had all these new questions from talking to her and from the things that we would talk about. And so I read a lot about the differences in theology. I talked to friends of mine that were Christian, friends that were Mormon, friends that were atheists. I talked to pastors. I even went and talked to some of the Mormon missionaries in the Institute building that's on South Campus. But I think that Lisa and I just kind of stopped trusting each other. And so, unfortunately, our conversations just grew shorter and shorter and more awkward and more tense. And then at the end of the year, we decided to not room together again. So let's take a little flash forward to now. About 5 years later, both of us have graduated. She's a teacher down in Phoenix. Both of us are married now. Lisa actually left the Mormon Church a few years ago, and as far as I know, she doesn't practice any kind of faith actively. But since then, I have done a lot more research and reading, and I've learned a lot more. And so this is what I wish I could go back and tell Lisa. That it is completely rational to believe in one thing over another. And in fact, in most cases, usually the important ones, there is one absolute truth, and all other things can't stand up to it. So, knowing Lisa, if I said that to her now, I imagine that she would probably respond something like, well, yeah, of course you would say that, Amy. You're the pastor's kid. You grew up in only one church, which she had two. You've never examined anything else or looked at anything from any other way, which is false. You're a Christian, and she would like say it in like a mean way or something. But I don't believe that because I'm a Christian. I actually believe that because of math. So I was never really that great at math in college and in high school, except for the math and music theory. I was actually really good at music theory. But logic is a very simple form of math. Some of you might have even taken like some sort of logic class or like logic and statistics or something. I don't know what's offered here. But logic is a really simple form of math that's really easy for me to understand. So I'm going to put on my FUSD badge from when I was a student teacher, and I'm going to give you a math lesson. Can you see it? Oh, no, I have to turn it around. Okay. So now you can call me Mrs. B, because this is what my students call me. All right, so let's look at some equations. The first one is called the law of identity. This is probably my favorite math equation, because look at how simple it is. A equals A. No, that's not false. Oh, okay. All right, so that doesn't really need any explanation. This music stand equals this music stand. 1 equals 1. Okay, all right. Any questions so far? Great. Okay, next equation. The law of non-contradiction. So A does not equal B if A and B are mutually exclusive. So in numbers, that's also very simple. 1 does not equal 2. 2 does not equal 6. Can't really argue with that. That's great. I love this. This is the kind of math that I understand. So if you transfer this to philosophy, it also makes sense. Relativism, or religion, I guess. So relativism states that every truth is equal, even the ones that contradict each other. But this simple equation, this law of logic and math, when applied philosophically, states that that's not the case. So, for an example, one person could say, I'm standing outside of the room, and another person could say, I'm standing inside of the room. But because those two statements are mutually exclusive, meaning they contradict each other, they can't both be true. And it's not irrational to say that only one of those people were right and one was wrong, because they contradict each other. I can't both be standing outside of the room and inside of the room at the same time. Okay, any questions so far? Are we good? Okay, I'm going to quiz you next week. I'm going to take this off too. I feel really dorky. Another more relevant example to what I'm talking about is atheists say there's no God, and theists say that there is a God. And it's impossible for both of those things to be true because they're mutually exclusive and they contradict each other. So, however bad we may feel about that, and however much we want to say that all beliefs are equally valid and true, it just can't be that way. One is true and one is not. And it's not irrational or intolerant or bigoted or closed-minded to believe with all of your heart and mind that one of those things is true and the other is false. That's just math. So what I'm trying to show you with this is that yes, it is rational to believe in something as true. And I'm also telling you to please just believe in something. Don't just be a relativist because you think you're being nice and you think that you just won't offend anyone that way. And don't live your life not believing in anything or committing to anything at all, because it's not only not offensive to believe that in something, but it's also logical and rational. So this is the point in the conversation with my brother Michael where we both agreed. We both agreed, okay, you're right. I think it's both rational and logical to believe in something. But God? Is it rational to believe in God? This is where all of Michael's questions came up that were on filling his papers. The God of the Bible? What? Is he even good? Is that true? Is any of it true? What about all the bad things happening across the world to good people? What about heaven and hell? That doesn't even make sense. That's not fair. What about crappy Christians and the Crusades and the Westboro Baptist Church? Obviously, there's no way for me to answer all of those questions. I wish that I could. But I realize that there's a lot of pain and emotions behind those questions. So I'm not going to try to insult your intelligence by just giving you some oversimplified answer like, but just look at the ocean and the mountains. That explains everything. There must be a God. Or I think of that scene at the end of A Walk to Remember, yes. That movie, where he's like standing on the balcony thing, and he's like, I believe in God like I believe in the wind, because even when I can't see it, I feel it, or something like that. And it's just like, come on. I like that movie too, okay? But that's just not, no, that's not enough. Okay, this is a tangent, but on the Myers-Briggs personality thing, if you know anything about that, I'm a 10 out of 10 F, or feeler, which means that I am completely emotionally driven. I make my decisions based off of emotions and logic, but that's still not enough for me. That's not okay. That's not a good enough explanation. So, anyways, I'm just trying to say that your questions and your hesitancies and your pain is valid in this situation. Well, and in all situations. So, thankfully, there's a lot of people who are much smarter than me, who have studied the many sides of this question, and many who have even devoted their life's work to answering this question through writing books and researching and talking to other really smart people. So, I did a lot of research coming into this, and I'm going to propose a few things that I learned from that research. So here's a new little idea. This is called the principle of sufficient reason. So this is no longer math. I'm very sorry. But this pretty simply just states that it's based on an instinct that we all share, which says everything needs an explanation. Scientific method. We want to explain everything. Nothing just is without reason why it is. And everything that is has some adequate or sufficient reason why it is. So, for example, if we just saw a cow appear right next to me, we wouldn't just accept that and be like, well, that was kind of weird, but okay, I'm not going to wonder about that. We would look for a cause of how it got there. We would assume that there would be one, so we wouldn't just, we would wonder, did it fall from the ceiling when we weren't looking? Or whatever. Is Hermione Granger here? Did she transfigure something? How did this cow get here? And if we couldn't come up with a physical explanation, we would then go to, or a physical cause, we would then look for a psychological cause. Maybe we would just say, I guess we're all hallucinating, or maybe we're all crazy, or maybe someone hypnotized us, or maybe someone hypnotized this cow, and that's why it got here, or as a last resort, we might even look for a supernatural cause, a miracle. But there must be some sort of cause. We might not ever find the cause, or maybe our cause will be disproven later. That's sort of the basis of the scientific method. But everything that comes into existence has a cause. So I'm going to read to you an excerpt from this guy named Peter Kreeft. He's written like 50 books or something on logic and philosophy. He really likes Socrates and Aristotle and those kind of guys. And he also really likes The Lord of the Rings, and he's written books about that. So that's how I found him. He's really cool. So it's going to be on the screen, but it's probably really small, so sorry. Okay, so he says this. Now, the whole universe is a vast interlocking chain of things that come into existence. Each of these things must therefore have a cause. My parents caused me, my grandparents caused them, etc. But it's not that simple. I would not be here without billions of causes, from the Big Bang through the cooling of the galaxies and the evolution of the protein molecule to the marriages of my ancestors. The universe is a vast and complex chain of causes. But does the universe as a whole have a cause? Is there a first cause, an uncaused cause, a transcendent cause of the whole chain of causes? If not, then there is an infinite regress of causes with no first link in the great cosmic chain. If so, then there is an eternal, necessary, independent, self-explanatory being with nothing above it, before it, or supporting it. It would have to explain itself as well as everything else, for if it needed something else as its explanation, its reason, its cause, then it would not be the first and uncaused cause. Such a being would have to be God, of course, or that's what we call him. If we can prove that there is such a first cause, we will have proved that there is a God. Okay, so I know I just said the word cause like way too many times, probably like 5 times in a sentence. And it's funny because that's what I call my husband. His name is Cosmo. But basically, if you were able to follow that, that is the basis of the idea of first cause, which is a pretty popular argument, or I guess you could call it a theory, which more simply states, whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. Therefore, the universe has a cause. And this cause is the God of classical theism. So that might seem like a big leap, and it did to me kind of at first too. So let me give you another example. Kaz, or Cosmo, and his brother are really cool also. They're both in our Star Wars picture. And because they're really cool, they had an entire bedroom of their house just for Legos. So also their mom was really cool because she let that happen. They had all kinds of Legos, from Star Wars Legos to Batman Legos to the original Lego sets, like the night ones with the horses and stuff. Johnny Thunder. I don't know that one. Sorry. So we can all agree that their Lego sets, as they exist now, which are still set up in his mom's house, so you can go see them if you're ever in Tucson, they had a beginning. They didn't just pop into existence from out of the box and make themselves. Cosmo and his brother Dimitri formed them, and they did a great job at it. Each set, each Batman set and Star Wars set, had a beginning time when they begged their mom to buy it, or they got it for Christmas or something. And each set had a cause. Cosmo and his brother's creativity and fun working with their hands and making it. So what the first cause argument is asking of us, however, is to make that leap from believing what I just said about Cosmo's Legos and believe the same thing about the whole universe. That it began to exist, that it is not, in fact, infinitely old. Believing that the universe began to exist and is not infinitely old, by the way, is very rational. Just a couple people who believe that: Aristotle, Einstein, Carl Sagan. Pretty much anyone who believes in the Big Bang Theory also believes that the universe began to exist. It wasn't just infinite. And most also agree that something must have caused that to happen. So because we have absolutely no evidence or scientific precedent to lead us to believe that anything, not matter, not light, not energy or time, has ever been created from nothing, so the logical conclusion, or the rational conclusion, is that something created the universe. So then that leads us to our next sort of thing: what kind of something? What? So we're led to believe it to be conscious. And I'll tell you why. Because it started exactly when it did, and not at other times, suggesting that a decision was made to do so. That something must be eternal and atemporal, which means that it was in order to create time, it has to be greater than time itself and outside of time itself, just like Cosmo and his brother were outside of and greater than their Lego sets, which is true. A force that's great enough to create all the matter and energy and complexities of the universe leads us to believe that that something is omnipotent, which means all-powerful, or very close to it. So that's where we have named this something the God of classical theism. So that was a very brief sort of explanation of an extremely multifaceted concept and a very complicated concept. But I think it's a little better than, but all the oceans and the mountains, and I feel the wind on my face, and so I know. I hope that you think that. I think that. I know that it can be argued. I'm not naive. I've been on YouTube. I've been on Facebook and Twitter. But what I want you to walk away with tonight is that belief in God is not automatically irrational because one of your professors told you that loudly, or someone online told you that rudely. A well thought out, highly intelligent, and completely rational reason for believing in the existence of a creator God has been around for a long time and believed in by many philosophers, astronomers, historians, cosmologists, all over the world, and cosmetologists too, probably. Yes. And it has only been solidified as we learn more about the nature of the universe and how it came to be. So you don't have to feel stupid about believing in God, even on a university campus. It's completely and scientifically and logically and cosmologically, rational. That's a hard word to say. Okay, so I'm well aware that even by engaging your mind, which hopefully I've been doing, I can't really convince you of anything if you disagree with me via me speaking to you like this, or through Facebook, or a snarky blog, or whatever. Because after all the time that I spent preparing for this presentation, I realized that this question, is it rational to believe in God, or is it even logical to say that God exists, it's not so much about our minds as we think it is. I think it's really more about our hearts. That's how it was for my roommate Lisa, and that's how it was for my brother Michael when I talked to him. So even if we can claim that it's rational to believe in something over another, and even if it's rational to believe in God, the God of classical theism, what about everything else? What about organized religion? Has that even done any good, or has it just brought more harm to the world? What's the point of everything, especially if so many people suck so much at being Christians? Not all Christians, but I know a lot really suck. why do people find so much satisfaction believing and following Jesus, and how the heck is any of that logical? So I realized that no amount of argument or logical proof or math equations or endless debate on the internet can satisfy those questions, and I'm not really trying to either. But after everything, we really have no choice but to look at the person of Jesus. So Jesus to you could be any number of things. He could be a joke. I've seen the memes. He could be just an important historical figure like Lincoln or MLK or something like that. Or maybe you think he's just a lunatic and you wish that people would stop talking about him, especially on a college campus. But we have to look at how he treated people and how he turned everything upside down by the ways that he treated people, like the sick and the prostitutes and the marginalized and the bitter and even the religious people. The crazy invitations that he made and the even crazier things that he did, like calling out religious hypocrisy pretty much every single time he opened his mouth, healing people miraculously inside and out, actually following through with everything that he taught and said, even down to his second to last breath, where he was forgiving the people that were killing him, literally as they were killing him. Who does that? It may be rational to believe in something over another thing. It might even be rational to believe that God exists. Maybe we can even take it further and say it's rational to believe that Jesus is that God. But is there anything rational about actually following him? Forgiving people who don't deserve it, caring for people more than I care about myself, giving away all of my hard-earned money and sacrificing my life plans and dreams, spending all my time with social outcasts, resting and waiting instead of constantly doing and self-promoting, calling out hypocrisy all the time and not being a hypocrite myself, not just saying, sending prayers your way on Facebook when someone is sick, but actually praying for someone who's sick and actually seeing them healed, giving up my whole life to do what I say that I care about. I don't think there's anything rational about any of those things. But Jesus, if you get to know him for yourself, instead of just listening to people joke about him or listening to the things that you've heard, even if you're like me and have grown up in the church your whole life, he will surprise you with his irrationality. If you've never read about Jesus for yourself, and I keep stressing that because I really mean that, not like what you've heard at church or even from me or from anyone else, if you actually read about him yourself, I would suggest starting with the Sermon on the Mount. That's like his longest and most famous sermon. I really think that you owe it to yourself as an educated person, as an intelligent person, to learn about him and not just listen to what everyone says about him. I think that it would be a crime for any person to leave college, to graduate college, without doing their own research and making an informed and educated decision about following Jesus. I really do believe that. And I promise that reading about him is actually probably a lot more interesting than most of your class readings, so it's really not that bad. And I also just want to say that Jesus sees the ways that Christians have sucked too. If you're someone that's here who has been really badly hurt by the church, which I'm guessing that there's probably at least some of you here that are like that, Jesus sees that too. And I just want to try to encourage you to look at Jesus separately. Those people, in whatever ways they hurt you, were not being Jesus. They were not reflecting Jesus. He's separate. He's not just irrational, but he's mysterious, he's miraculous, he's unexplained, and he's unexplainable. And that miraculous, conscious, eternal, omnipotent, irrational Jesus will turn everything upside down and change your life. There's a lot more that I could say about this, but what I did hope that you heard clearly is that belief is rational. Belief in one thing, not just all things, is logical and rational. Belief in God is rational. Not only rational, but philosophically, historically, and astronomically viable. Following Jesus is probably not rational by our standards, by the world's standards, but it's beautiful and it's fulfilling and it's life-changing, and it's worth having your entire world turned upside down for. Also, Christianity does provide some answers to these questions that we have that are hard, that are intellectual questions and emotional questions. But if we're going to engage with them, we really need to be honest with ourselves what our real questions are. So I hope you can do that tonight as we continue talking. So I have a few sort of things I want to propose that we do to respond. First, I want you to keep asking questions. So maybe while you've been thinking about this and while you've been listening to me, you're like my brother and you just thought of like 100 other questions and arguments and things that came to your mind. And so write those down. Keep talking about them. Don't just go back to your dorm tonight or your apartment and just, I don't know, ignore it or think that's too hard or I don't really want to talk about that. Please keep talking. Please keep asking questions. And like I said earlier, a great opportunity to do that is the next 2 weeks here at InterVarsity. Next week we're talking about why do bad things happen to good people? How could a good God, or a God that we say is good, actually allow these bad things to happen and suffering? And then the week after that, we're going to talk about Jesus a little more. Is it even worth it to follow Jesus? What about all the crazy things that Amy just said about him? What? So keep coming back. Also, chapter camp. We talked about that. Mallory and Charles sort of talked about that at the beginning. Seriously, that is like the best possible environment that you could ever be in to study Jesus for the first time. You're on an island and it's beautiful and it's really fun, but you're in this safe place with people who have just as many questions as you do. It's not just a bunch of Christians just doing weird Christian-y things. I promise you. And I just think you should take a risk. Like if that is kind of piquing your interest, I just want to double dog dare you to do it and to take the risk. Now you have to, because I just double dog dared you. You owe it to yourself to at least be educated before you make your decision about God and Jesus. And so that's a great place to do that. And it's on an island. I know everyone wants to go on an island on spring break, so you should just do it. Also, so for tonight, I'm going to put some questions up on the screen. You don't have to do it yet, but I want you to talk with whoever it was that invited you here, or if you just came on your own accord, just with whoever's sitting next to you, and keep talking about this. Like I said, I want you to have your voice heard too. It's not just about listening to me ramble at you. And I also want to reiterate that you can actually grow from talking with someone who disagrees with you or who thinks differently with you, and I don't think we do that enough, frankly, in this context. Be honest with each other, and obviously be respectful towards each other. Yeah, so here are the questions, and you don't have to answer these if you don't want to. You can talk about whatever, you can interpret it yourself. But this is just to help you get started, so it doesn't feel like, okay, what are we supposed to be doing, or whatever. So we'll put on some like quiet music, and we'll even turn on the lights. But go ahead and do that now. You can get in little groups, doesn't matter, I don't care how many people it is. And then in a few minutes, someone will come back up and dismiss you for the night. So thank you for coming, and I hope that you come back to the rest of our Hard Questions About God series.